The lie we lived. Ethan Carter always believed in the Galvan's version of history. It was taught in every human school, repeated in every news broadcast, and whispered as an undeniable truth: humans were weak. They were slower than the Galvan. Less intelligent than the Galvan. Less capable than the Galvan. And yet, they were graciously allowed to live among them. The Galvan were the rulers of the Zifra station, a colossal orbital city that floated in deep space, far from any habitable planet. Humans were given small jobs, maintenance, clerical work, and some low-level science roles, but never anything important. Ethan worked in the medical research division, processing data for Galvan doctors. His job was simple: analyze human test results and file them away. He never questioned anything. Not until that day. The numbers that shouldn't exist. Ethan sat at his terminal, sipping synthetic coffee as he scanned through Genetic Report 8349H. It was standard procedure: verify the numbers, compare them to past data, and send them off to the archives. But today, something didn't add up. His eyes narrowed. The test subject, a human worker from the lower levels, had displayed bone density 40% higher than the Galvan average. His muscle fibers were denser than recorded human limits. His reaction speed was comparable to a Galvan soldier. That was impossible. Humans were supposed to be fragile. Weak. Incapable of competing with their alien overseers. But these numbers, they told a different story. Ethan double-checked the test ID, then cross-referenced it with old reports. His heartbeat quickened. It wasn't an error. There were hundreds of similar reports. And they all pointed to the same thing: humans were stronger than the Galvan claimed. His mind raced. If this was true, then everything they had been taught was a lie. But why? And more importantly, who was hiding it? Ethan. You need to delete that file. Now. A cold sweat formed on Ethan's brow. He had to tell someone. He turned to his left, where Jared, his longtime friend and fellow researcher, was reviewing oxygen consumption rates. Jared, Ethan whispered, waving him over. You need to see this. Jared sighed and rolled his chair over. What now? Another Galvan miracle cure that's just overpriced water? Ethan shook his head. No, this is different. He turned the monitor so Jared could see the results. Jared scanned the data, his casual smirk fading. His hands tightened on the desk. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Ethan, his voice was low, urgent. Where did you get this? It was in the system. Open access. Jared's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he did something strange: he disabled the data log. Ethan frowned. What are you doing? Jared didn't look at him. He just whispered. You need to delete that file. Now. The ones who vanish. Ethan's stomach turned. Why? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jared exhaled shakily. Because I've seen numbers like these before. And the people who found them, he hesitated. They disappeared. Ethan's blood ran cold. Jared leaned in closer, his voice barely audible. A few years ago, Dr. Henshaw, one of our best researchers, was analyzing human endurance tests. He told me he found something huge. Something that didn't make sense. Ethan swallowed. And? Jared's eyes darkened. The next day, security hauled him away. We never saw him again. Ethan's hands felt clammy. Jared continued, that wasn't the only time. Every few months, someone finds something strange. Then they vanish. Ethan looked at the screen. His screen. His login credentials. His fingerprints. The system knew he had seen this. He felt a chill creep up his spine. We need to get out of here, Jared said, shutting down the terminal. Right now. Ethan hesitated. Shouldn't we report this? Jared gave him a sharp look. Report it, to who? Ethan had no answer. Then, beep. A small red icon flashed in the corner of the monitor. Security alert detected. Ethan and Jared locked eyes. Someone knew. And they were coming. Nowhere to run. The red security alert pulsed on Ethan's screen, a silent warning that sent a cold wave of fear through him. Jared cursed under his breath. They flagged the file. We have maybe 2 minutes before they send someone to investigate. Ethan's mind raced. He had no idea what the Galvan would do to him if they found out he had accessed restricted data. But if what Jared said was true, he wasn't about to wait and find out. What do we do? Ethan whispered. Jared glanced around, then pointed to the emergency access panel near the back of the lab. We erase our tracks and get out. Ethan hurried to his terminal. He wiped the local logs, but the central system had already flagged his access. There was no way to erase the main record. Too late. Jared grabbed Ethan's wrist. We need to move. Now. A sudden inspection. They slipped out of the lab just in time. As they turned the corner into a dimly lit corridor, Ethan heard the metallic clank-clank of Galvan security boots. Seconds later, a unit of 3 armed guards stepped into the lab. Ethan and Jared pressed against the cold metal wall, holding their breath as the lead guard, a towering Galvan with dark green skin, spoke into his communicator. The data logs flagged unauthorized access. Secure the lab and prepare for a full audit. Ethan felt his pulse pounding. Jared leaned in and whispered, if they catch us, we're dead. Ethan wasn't ready to test that theory. They needed to disappear. Hunted. Jared led the way, weaving through maintenance corridors that only human workers used. The Galvan rarely came down here, it was too cramped for their tall frames. As they moved, Ethan tried to think. The classified reports showed that humans were stronger than the Galvan claimed. The people who discovered this vanished. And now, he and Jared were being hunted. His gut told him something bigger was happening. Then, Jared stopped abruptly. Ethan nearly bumped into him. What? Jared pointed at the intersection ahead. A security checkpoint, 2 Galvan guards scanning IDs. We're trapped, Ethan whispered. Jared's expression hardened. Not yet. He pointed toward a maintenance hatch on the wall. Ethan's stomach dropped. You want to go into the air ducts? Jared gave him a look. Unless you want to shake hands with a Galvan interrogator. Ethan sighed. Fine. But if I get stuck, I swear. Jared pushed him up. The hidden truth. They crawled through the narrow, dust-filled duct, their movements slow and careful. Below them, the station continued as normal, but nothing was normal anymore. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the genetic reports. If humans were stronger, faster, and smarter than the Galvan admitted, why were they being suppressed? Then, a thought struck him. What if humanity wasn't always weak? He turned to Jared. You said people disappeared after finding things like this. But what did they actually find? Jared hesitated. Then he whispered, the truth. We weren't always like this. Ethan's stomach twisted. What do you mean? Jared swallowed. There's a group, humans who figured it out years ago. They live in the lower levels, beyond the security grids. I know someone who can tell us more. Ethan stared. You've known about this? Why didn't you ever say anything? Jared shook his head. Because knowing the truth doesn't help if you can't do anything about it. Ethan exhaled. That was about to change. The resistance. Jared led them through the ducts until they reached a hidden exit behind an old storage bay. Ethan climbed out first, dusting himself off. He was about to complain about the filth, when he saw where they were. A vast, underground settlement stretched before them. Humans. Hundreds of them. They weren't wearing standard worker uniforms. They looked different. Some wore old military gear. Others had weapons scavenged from Galvan technology. And all of them had the same hardened, knowing look in their eyes. A hidden human resistance. Jared motioned for Ethan to follow. "There's someone you need to meet." The elder who knew. They walked through the underground corridors until they reached a small room filled with old, pre-war human artifacts, things that weren't allowed on the station anymore. Sitting in a chair, hunched over a data tablet, was Gregor, an old human with a deep scar across his jaw. He looked up, eyes sharp and alert. "So," Gregor said, his voice gravelly. "You finally found out, huh?" Ethan's throat went dry. "You know about the reports?" Gregor chuckled. "Kid, I've known for years." He leaned forward. "The Galvan lied to us. We were never weak." Ethan's hands clenched. "Then, why? Why keep us down?" Gregor's expression darkened. "Because," he said slowly, "if humans ever realize their true potential, the Galvan won't be able to stop us." A heavy silence filled the room. Ethan's mind reeled. Everything he had ever known, his entire existence, was built on a lie. And now, there was no turning back. A history that never was. Ethan sat stiffly across from Gregor, his heart pounding. The dimly lit underground chamber was filled with old human relics, books, photographs, even a rusted pre-war combat helmet. Things that weren't allowed in the Galvan-controlled parts of the station. Jared stood nearby, his arms crossed, watching as Gregor took a slow, deliberate breath. "You want the truth?" Gregor asked, his weathered face unreadable. Ethan nodded. Gregor exhaled. "Then listen carefully, kid. The history you were taught? It's a lie. The war they erased." Gregor tapped a button on his tablet. A holographic map of the galaxy flickered to life, displaying hundreds of interconnected star systems. Ethan's eyes widened. These were ancient human trade routes, but those had been wiped from historical records. Before the Galvan took control, Gregor began, humans were one of the most dominant species in the galaxy. Ethan frowned. "That doesn't make sense. We were barely spacefaring when the Galvan found us." Gregor chuckled darkly. "That's what they want you to believe." He zoomed in on a cluster of planets. Humans had an empire. We weren't conquerors, but we were damn good at war. Not because we were the strongest, not because we had the best technology, but because we were the most adaptable species out there. Jared nodded. "It's in our biology. We don't just survive under pressure, we evolve." Gregor continued. "At some point, we and the Galvan came into conflict. Records say it was over territory, but I don't believe that. The Galvan were afraid of us." Ethan's mind reeled. This was impossible. Humans had lost the war against the Galvan. Everyone knew that. But Gregor wasn't finished. "The war didn't end with humanity's defeat," he said, voice grim. "It ended with our surrender." Ethan stiffened. "Why would we surrender if we were winning?" Gregor looked him dead in the eyes. "Because we made a peace agreement with the Galvan. We offered to coexist." Ethan's breath caught. "What happened?" Gregor's jaw tightened. "The Galvan betrayed us. The Great Suppression. They couldn't destroy us outright," Gregor explained, "so they used something far worse than war." Jared picked up the story. "They rewrote our history. They took control of our education, our science, our genetics." Gregor nodded. Humans weren't weak, but the Galvan made us believe we were. They spread false records, manipulated data, and Ethan suddenly remembered the genetic reports. His stomach dropped. They did something to us, didn't they? Gregor's expression darkened. The Galvan engineered suppression protocols, drugs, environmental conditions, even psychological manipulation. Every human on this station, every human in Galvan space, is being held back. Ethan's mind raced. If this was true, then humans had been deliberately weakened for generations. What about Earth? He asked. Didn't they fight back? Jared looked away. Gregor sighed. No one knows, he admitted. The Galvan cut us off from Earth centuries ago. Ethan's fists clenched. Humans were stronger than they had been led to believe. Their history had been stolen. And their potential was being suppressed. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt real anger. The first step to rebellion. Gregor leaned forward. You're here now. That means you want to fight back. Ethan hesitated. His mind screamed at him to run, to forget what he had learned. But he couldn't. Not anymore. He met Gregor's gaze. What do we do? Gregor smiled. We wake humanity up. Jared smirked. Now you're thinking like a real human. Ethan exhaled. He had no idea what came next. But one thing was certain, everything was about to change. The plan. Ethan could barely process everything he had just learned. Humans weren't weak. We were made weak. And now, the Galvan knew that he knew. Gregor folded his arms. We need to move fast. They'll come looking for you. Jared nodded. They probably already are. Ethan's mind raced. We need proof. Something undeniable. Gregor's lips curled into a grim smile. I was hoping you'd say that. He pulled up a holographic map of the station. There's an old pre-war human ship hidden deep in the restricted sectors. If the Galvan haven't destroyed its records, we might find unmodified human genetic data. Ethan's eyes widened. Undeniable proof. Gregor continued, we break in, download the data, and broadcast it to every human on this station. Jared smirked. Sounds simple. Gregor's expression hardened. It won't be. The first alarm. They moved quickly through the lower corridors, staying out of sight. But as they approached the restricted sector, security alerts blared across the station. A cold chill ran through Ethan. Jared grabbed his arm. They locked the station down. Gregor cursed. They know you're missing. Ethan's stomach twisted. The Galvan weren't just searching for them, they were preparing to make him disappear. Running out of time. Jared led them through a maintenance tunnel that bypassed security checkpoints. But as they neared the ship's storage bay, they heard it, the heavy footfalls of Galvan soldiers. They're already here, Ethan whispered. Gregor cursed. They must have predicted our move. Jared glanced at a narrow side passage. We split up. I'll lead them away. Ethan grabbed his wrist. That's suicide. Jared grinned. Not if you don't get caught. Before Ethan could argue, Jared took off, deliberately making noise. Seconds later, Galvan voices shouted in the distance, followed by running footsteps. Gregor pulled Ethan forward. Come on, kid. We don't have time. The hidden ship. They slipped through the last security door and entered a dark hangar filled with abandoned spacecraft. And there, covered in dust, was a massive human battleship, the Orion. Ethan's breath caught. It was beautiful, sleek, powerful, and completely unlike the weaker, outdated vessels humans were allowed to use. Gregor moved fast, leading Ethan toward the data core at the heart of the ship. They had made it. But as Ethan stepped forward, he heard a low, mechanical hum. His blood ran cold. "They're already inside," Gregor whispered. Cornered. Ethan pressed against the cold metal wall, heart pounding. A group of Galvan enforcers stood near the ship's main terminal. They were extracting data. Ethan clenched his fists. If they got to the records first, humanity's last chance at the truth would be lost. Gregor looked at him. "You ready to fight for the truth?" Ethan exhaled. "No more running." He nodded. Gregor smiled. "Then let's remind them who we really are." A fight for the truth. Ethan's breath came slow and steady. Beside him, Gregor crouched low, his fingers tightening around an old shock pistol. Ahead, 6 Galvan enforcers were working at the Orion's main terminal, their voices low and urgent. "They're trying to wipe the records," Gregor whispered. "We don't have much time." Ethan's jaw clenched. If they deleted that data, everything would be lost. He didn't think. He acted. The attack. Ethan grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground. With a sharp exhale, he launched it across the hangar. Clang! The pipe crashed into a stack of crates. The Galvan snapped to attention, their weapons drawn. Gregor fired first. A blue energy bolt slammed into the nearest guard, sending him sprawling. The others turned, but Ethan was already moving. He charged forward, grabbing a discarded Galvan rifle as he slid across the floor. Crack! He fired. 1 enforcer dropped. Gregor took down another. 3 left. 1 lunged at Ethan with an electrified baton. Ethan barely dodged the first swing, but something inside him reacted faster than he thought possible. Without thinking, he countered, grabbing the Galvan's wrist and twisting with unnatural strength. Snap! The enforcer howled, dropping the weapon. Ethan's mind reeled. He had never moved like that before. Was Gregor right? Had humans been held back all along? No time to think. Gregor took out another enforcer. Ethan swung the baton, hard. The last Galvan collapsed. The fight was over. The lost records. Ethan didn't waste a second. He rushed to the terminal. The Galvan had already started the purge. 94% of the files were gone. Come on, Ethan muttered, his fingers flying over the controls. He accessed the last intact backup. A single file remained, Project Suppression, Human Adaptation Limitations. Ethan transferred it to a portable drive. He pulled it free just as Gregor came up behind him. Did you get it? Ethan held up the drive. Yeah, he breathed. I got it. The revelation. Gregor led Ethan back through the ship, avoiding detection. Once safe, Ethan plugged the drive into a portable projector. Lines of data filled the air. And then he saw it. Humans weren't weaker. They were evolving. The more pressure, the more danger, the stronger they became. The Galvan knew this. That's why they kept humanity docile. Kept them weak. Because if they didn't, humans would surpass them. Ethan's heart pounded. Gregor exhaled. Now you understand. Ethan clenched his fists. Everything they had ever been told was a lie. But now, they had proof. Ethan stared at the data in disbelief. This was it. Proof that humans had been deliberately weakened, suppressed, controlled. He turned to Gregor. We need to get this out, to every human on the station. Gregor nodded. The Galvan control all major networks, but we have our own system. He led Ethan through winding tunnels until they reached a hidden underground control center, the Resistance's main hub. Jared was already there, battered but alive. Took you long enough, he muttered, clutching his side. Ethan ignored the joke. We have the files. We're exposing everything. Gregor motioned to a communications console. This is our best shot, he said. But once we send this out, the Galvan won't just sit back. They'll come for us. Ethan didn't hesitate. Then we'll be ready. The truth goes public. Ethan uploaded the files. A station-wide transmission activated. All across Zifra Station, screens flickered. Every human, **** workers, scientists, engineers, soldiers, **** watched as the hidden truth was revealed. Genetic suppression. Psychological conditioning. Lies upon lies. For generations, humanity had been shackled. Now, the chains were breaking. In the streets, chaos erupted. Galvan enforcers tried to shut down the message, but it was too late. The truth was out. And humans were waking up. The Galvan's worst fear. Within minutes, reports flooded in. Workers refused to obey Galvan orders. Guards, once passive, began fighting back. Even suppressed humans were moving faster, thinking sharper, their minds breaking free from the limits imposed on them. Gregor grinned. They're remembering who they are. Jared grabbed a stolen Galvan rifle. And now, it's our turn. A reckoning begins. Ethan and his team marched toward the upper levels. They weren't alone. Humans were rising all over the station. Galvan forces fought back, but something was different. Humans weren't afraid anymore. They weren't just resisting. They were winning. And for the first time in centuries, the Galvan realized something terrifying. They weren't controlling humanity anymore. They were losing to them. The final stand. Ethan stood at the front of a growing human army. Once weak and controlled, these people now moved with purpose, their eyes sharp with the newfound strength and intelligence that had been hidden from them for so long. The air on Zifra Station had changed. Humans were no longer afraid. The Galvan, once rulers of the galaxy, had no idea what was coming. Ethan and Gregor had gathered a coalition of workers, engineers, soldiers, and scientists, all united under one goal: to free humanity from the chains of oppression. And now, they had one final mission: take control of the station. The Galvan's last chance. The Galvan's leadership tried to rally their forces. They offered a truce, a promise of peace if the humans would stop the rebellion. But it was too late. Gregor scoffed. They can't give us peace when they've been lying to us for centuries. Ethan clenched his fists. We've waited long enough. He turned to the others. It's time we show them that humanity isn't something to be feared. It's something to be reckoned with. The final battle. The final battle took place in the heart of Zifra Station, in the Galvan Command Center, the place where the fate of the galaxy had been decided for too long. Ethan, Gregor, Jared, and their soldiers stormed the building, facing the last line of Galvan enforcers. Gunfire rang out. Explosions rocked the walls. Humans, once suppressed, fought with a ferocity the Galvan had never seen. Ethan was in the thick of it. He fought alongside Jared, who had become a force to be reckoned with himself. The two of them moved through the battle like a single entity, their strength and coordination unmatched. The Galvan were falling back. Everywhere Ethan looked, humans were taking control, fighting with strength they hadn't known they had. The Galvan surrender. By the time they reached the central command room, the Galvan were broken. The Galvan High Council was trapped, backed into a corner by the growing human forces. Ethan stood before them. We know the truth now, he said. You've lied to us. You've kept us small, afraid, but we're not afraid anymore. One of the Galvan leaders, a towering figure with dark green skin, sneered. You think you can defeat us? We control the galaxy. We are the superior race. Ethan smiled. Not anymore. He stepped forward, activating the broadcast system. A single message flashed across every screen in Zifra Station and beyond. Humanity rises. Ethan turned to Gregor and Jared. This is only the beginning. The Galvan knew it too. They could see it in the eyes of every human. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. The final lesson. As the Galvan leaders were taken away, and the last of their forces surrendered, Ethan stood amidst the humans who had fought so hard. They were bruised and battered, but their eyes were filled with hope. For the first time in history, humans knew their true worth. Ethan walked over to Gregor. "You were right," he said quietly. "We were always stronger than they ever knew. We just had to believe it for ourselves." Gregor smiled. "Sometimes, it takes a lie to wake us up. But the truth?" He paused, his voice firm. "That's the real power." Ethan nodded. "We're no longer the lesser species. We are humans. And now, we're going to show the galaxy what that really means."